Well, welcome back to another week's analysis behind the news. Of course, the big story last week was the Republican Party debates run by Fox News in two segments. The one that I was more interested in was the 10-man panel. And I always look for the nuances in these things to see how the people in charge control the venue and control the candidates. I've been involved in a lot of Republican Party conventions and that sort of thing over the years. And if you don't know how they control it, you don't even notice it. It just goes right past you. But of course, the main thing is that they always control the microphone. That's number one. They always set the mood. They always set the general flavor of it right at the onset so that it sets the people up for a fall. This was quite obvious by the way that they had arranged the audience. You think that the audience was just simply people who came in from Ohio and other places and sat down. Except if you'd been very observant, you would have noticed that there was a certain number of people with the same t-shirt who occupied the very front square of the seats in front of the audience, down on the main floor, closest to all the microphones. So that crowd there in that block would have a bigger impact on the viewing audience because of their cheers or boos, as the case may be. That block was controlled by Kasich individuals. And if you notice the t-shirts they were wearing, the silk screening on them, and how they controlled the people that got into that section, was very interesting. Then, of course, the first question was to get Donald Trump mad and also expose him as a maverick. You see, one of the biggest things in the Republican Party is party loyalty, regardless of anything. They always talk about an umbrella. They want a bigger umbrella to cater to a wider number of voters. Well, there's no sense talking about that particularly other than to say the umbrella always moves left. The umbrella is never allowed to move right or independently. So they will always do everything they can to destroy anyone who's a maverick, anyone who believes in the Constitution, bar none, under the original intent of the Constitution. That is the way they operate in the Republican Party. Fox News is really no different. And so you see that sort of thing going on, and you can see these little nuances and other things where they control it. I think the main purpose was to destroy a couple of men on the stage, particularly Rand Paul and Trump, and get them arguing with one another, Christie and so on and so forth, and then declare a winner. And of course, the winner that came out of this by all prognostication of the newsmen was Rubio. Well, that very day that Rubio was on that platform with the other candidates, he had written an article and published on the Council on Foreign Relations online magazine, Foreign Affairs. So you can see that he's getting in with the insiders. He's being elevated through the readership of the Council on Foreign Relations magazine out to its minions. So he's the darling of the boys right now. We'll see whether it turns out, whether it's him or Jeb Bush or whomever, but that's the point. A couple of things, and I'm not a defender of Trump. Frankly, I have problems with all 10 men who appear on that stage because, well, we have a research department here. And we know some of the background of these men and what they're involved in and their positions. For one, never was there a single question asked pertaining to the sovereignty and independence of the American people and the Constitution of the United States. The closest thing that got to it was that little exchange between Christie and Rand Paul over the Fourth Amendment. But the thing is that one of the things that has come out since the debate is the insult of Trump to Megyn. Well, we're not supposed to have, he says that Trump women aren't sex objects. And yet we have the woman that he was supposedly calling a sex object in these poses. This is Megyn Kelly. If she doesn't want to be a sex object when she's a commentator, I don't know whether this is photoshopped or anything, but this is really going around the internet right now, showing how she used to pose. You know, I wouldn't want my wife posing like this, okay? You know, looks like a sex object to me. I don't know what your interpretation is. But one of the things that Trump should be doing, and the other candidates as well, is reading the New American Magazine. Because one of the questions that was leveled at Trump was, does he have proof that the Mexican government is actually helping people get across the border and shoving these people up into the United States? Well, several years ago, we wrote about the Mexican government comic book. Now, this is in Spanish, and it translated, it says Guide to Mexican Immigrants. And this is a comic book that the Mexican government published for anybody coming across the border illegally, and how to get across the border, and how to assimilate into American society and not get caught. There are several pages to this. And it's, like it says, it's a guide. Of course, it should say a guide of how to sneak into the United States, stay there, and get on the dole on your license plate. I mean, your driver's license. But that is basically what's going on, and it all in vibrant color comic book that we exposed in the New American some time back, showing people that yes, the Mexican government is actively involved in putting people across the border, encouraging people to come across the border and stay here and get everything they can in the benefits that are there. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the recent hullabaloo in Seattle, not far, just a couple of miles away from the Lenin statue that exists in glory of Lenin, the brutal communist Bolshevik leader of Russia, is in Seattle. Bernie Sanders had a rally, a relatively small one compared to the evening one. There were a few thousand people, and then these people got up and started to harangue Sanders, saying Black Lives Matter, and wouldn't let Bernie Sanders speak. And there's a purpose for this. Now, everybody says, well, Bernie Sanders is on the left. Well, that's true. You've got Hillary, and then to the left of Hillary is Bernie Sanders. Well, if you're all out there by yourself on the left, you know, you can't garner a lot of support. You have the hardcore of the socialists that turn out and the dummies that have no clue what socialism means because Bernie is saying things that they want to hear. But how do you moderate him without changing the message? And this is how it's done. They get these extremists to come in and disrupt his meetings. And they look like the extremists, you see, and this makes Bernie Sanders look like more of a moderate, because he doesn't go along with all these radicals from the real hardcore communist organizations and that sort of thing. So that's the techniques that they use. They will split something out that's to the left and then split something out even more to make that one that they want to move into, to transition into, look as though that is the moderate position. That evening they had 15,000 people in Seattle for Sanders, and it was $200 to $1,000 each to get in and hear him. 15,000. Then he went to Portland, Oregon, and got 17,000. So this is a growing movement, a socialist movement. That a socialist individual, you can call him independent, he's a socialist running for president. And last, I want to bring your attention something that is a recent development, not entirely, but a recent event last week, was that the Soleimani, who is the head of the Quds in Iran, visited Moscow. And the Quds are the organization that has a lot of the terrorism outside of Iran under Iranian government sanction, being promoted all over the Middle East and Europe and so on and so forth. The head of that just visited Russia. In addition to that, a couple of other developments, the head of Hamas has been invited to Moscow as well. In addition to that, the Russians, right after the Iranian treaty was signed, has moved into the Middle East, places like Qatar and Qatar, however they pronounce it these days, and Saudi Arabia getting them to buy Russian nuclear power plants. And in addition to that, the Russians want to help operate the existing power plants or any of those that they've ordered from the Germans, the French, the Americans, and that sort of business. So the Russians are actually helping promote the nuclear proliferation in those countries, because you can segue from that into other things in, from peaceful use of atomic power to not very peaceful use of atomic power. So the Russians have long been behind all of this stuff in the Middle East. A little of it has come out in the open if you go online and look for it. But you have to look for it. And that's what we've been encouraging all along. We're running out of time. Until next week, we'll see you then.